All right, continuing and keeping this thing rolling. If you're coming from the previous series where I was talking about all eight of the Tennessee Titans 2026 NFL draft selections, this is the Barnes University version where it's just simply me telling you guys who I would have selected in real time. Some picks are similar, some picks are different, and I just give you my analysis and my reasoning behind where I may have pivoted in a completely different direction, or like I said, or in lockstep. So for the people who are first time viewing, just so you know, the messenger, my name is Charles Barnes at BU_scouting on most social media platforms. I have a background in coaching basketball and football, being in recruiting offices collegiately. And for a decade plus, I've kept up with my evaluations and have a high hit rate, as well as my free agency hit rate. And then obviously been in GM courses, meeting GMs, having their number, having scouts numbers and stuff like that. So really put in the time, really put in the work. Watched over 950 plus prospects this year. So pretty elaborate and comprehensive information regarding this draft class. And thank God for that. So let's get it started. So who would I have selected with pick number 4 overall in this draft process? So I'll start with my tiers and my buckets of how I viewed it. So for me personally, I really got to the point to where it was going to be Jeremiah Love had he fell, and then any defensive player that I felt like was necessary or who was available. And my reasoning behind that was the Love pick would be a player that obviously adds to the offense, home run hitting ability, just a special athlete out of the backfield and has a versatile profile. And I think that that would have been important for the Titans. Now, I've already stated that I have the negatives on Jeremiah Love as well in terms of like I'm not a fan of his biomechanics, the way that he moves, and things like that. But that's really the only thing that I could really say, other than not wanting to put too much tread on his tires based off of that profile biomechanics. However, as a pure player, and I'm not playing doctor or not playing movement coach, he's up there. He's not quite Gibbs to me or Bijan Robinson, Bijan Robinson, excuse me, but he's close. And then obviously any defensive player like Arvell Reese was on the table, obviously still literally being available and actually being available. Bailey had already gone. And I wasn't going to go Bain Jr. because I'm not taking that player right there with those certain limitations to his physical profile. And then it just came down to Sonny Styles or Arvell Reese for me. And then I just selected the more power player, the player that I believe, just offers uh more physicality. Arvell Reese's speed, Sonny Styles is physicality. So I selected Sonny Styles, and I think that throughout the process, a lot of people talked about moving Arvell Reese to edge or him being an edge or even graded as an edge. I see Arvell Reese as a stand-up, off the ball linebacker, at least to start his career. Can he develop into a consistent edge? Sure, but that's just how I see him initially. With Sonny Styles, obviously he's an off the ball linebacker, but no one ever thought to say, hey, Sonny Styles could also play edge too, and he's more physical. Um, he's bigger, and he could do that as well. I think he went to a good scheme fit with the Commanders because the Commanders, right, they're gonna move him around kind of like what they did with Frankie Louvu, which I think was a good comp for Arvell Reese, and I think my comp for Sonny Styles as a traditional linebacker, I didn't really want to go to the Fred Warner because I watched Fred Warner live at BYU, and I was higher on him when he was coming out than most, and look what he's become. And I just don't see the similar type of players. Um, I think there's some instinct things that Fred Warner has over Sonny Styles, but I think like just watching him in his element, like they called Keith Bullock Mr. Monday Night, right? That rangy ability, the ability that I think that once he gets the tape study, once he gets in the NFL, uh, uh, position group room, that I think those will start to take over. And maybe it will be Fred Warner, but for right now, just it just reminded me play style wise of Keith Bullock, who I'm not trying to say Keith Bullock is not as instinctual, but I'm just saying that I watched Fred Warner live, so I have a different type of opinion about that evaluation. But he's very similar to his teammate now, Leo Chenal as well, Rolando McClain type of skill set, body type, Bernard McKinney, if you remember him. These types of these skill sets, and obviously if he bottoms out, Isaiah Simmons of the world, but that's who I picked. Just simply defensive versatility, physical player. I never really got to wide receiver. That's my biggest, um, I guess confession of the 2026 NFL draft. I never got to wide receiver for me personally. It would have to have been a trade down situation. And that's it's going to be easy to say if one of these wide receiver pans out and says that, oh, they should have gone fourth, right? And that's in retrospect, right? That these people like to do. But in terms of a deep draft class, 36 wide receivers were taken this year. Um, and in terms of just like the high end ceiling and athletic profile and just overall trust, overall situation, it didn't really scream there was a top five receiver in this draft class. Now the Titans obviously, and you can go watch the video, they took their guy, their person, and it works for them. But for me, I never got there. It would have taken a trade back situation to justify taking any of those receivers there. I had Tyson and Tate as wide receiver one A, one B type of situation, and it would have taken a trade back for me to make that move. It was running back Jeremiah Love or one of the defensive players for me, and it would take it a trade back and gaining a significant amount of compensation to make that wide receiver selection. And it's not even guaranteed I would have went wide receiver in a trade back. It would just, at least with that first pick. A lot of the trade back scenarios were centered around like the Cowboys getting 12 and 20. That was a perfect sweet spot for me because one of those picks I know for sure would have probably been Makai Lemon, and that's probably the receiver I would have been most comfortable with. A lot of people say Cardinal Tate is the safest. I think Makai Lemon is probably the safest wide receiver selection from the first round, in my opinion. Probably the safest. Um, so that's my pick. It would have been Sonny Styles. I think some of the negatives, like I said, he could floor out this this archetype of linebacker has it's if it's finding difficulty sticking and having a success rate that tall because football is essentially about leverage, right? The low man wins. So that's why I was like with Sonny Styles, I actually prefer him to be outside of the hashes or outside, the tackles more. I think he could be more lethal that way, standing up as almost an edge prospect and then obviously in that big nickel role. And can he bang and can he almost teleport into the backfield from that inside linebacker position and range? Yes, but I don't necessarily have to put him there. So low man wins. That will always be the case in football. So I understand the doubt, but the high end level of leadership, the high end level of physicality, and then position versatility, if used the right way. I don't know if there's any team that has used their linebacker other than obviously the Cowboys when they had Parsons, and then the Packers barely got to use Parsons before he got hurt. But we're talking about like moving guys around from linebacker position to edge to over center to the zero to the one, to the five to the seven to the nine, using these players in several different positions. And I think that Sonny Styles offers that.